Hey everybody, Hip Pause here. Here to bring you just a couple of quick tips that you can do in Kismet using UDK here. And let me first just show you what it is. If I hit play here, you'll see that I've got these cave entrance things. They're just donuts, basically, rock donuts. It doesn't make any difference. You see I got a couple doors over here. I got a decal here. These are just going to be three really quick tips. So what happens is when I come in here and I hit play, you see that that rock is much larger, okay? And what happens is when I get closer to it, it scales based on my size. Now the LEDs are still kicking in. You can see them change right there, okay? And as I get closer, it scales back down to 1, but as I get farther away, it basically scales up to 4. So that's based on distance. The other one I got here, when I shoot it, every time I shoot it, it gets bigger. Until it gets to a certain size, it'll actually reset. But I have that reset set really high. So let me just show you how I pulled those off really quick. And actually, I might as well just show you the last event. This here is not just a rotator. This is actually a scale form animation. See if I can't get a view of it here. When I start, you'll see that it actually grows into place. Okay, if you hit that, if I hit that again, you see that it grows into place. And I've also got these doors here that as I get closer and farther away, they open up and close based on your distance. Real simple. Not very complicated or anything like that, but it is based on your proximity to the door. So if I manage to be going really fast, the doors will be open in time for me to get through. So those are the three things I'm going to show you how I did really quick. I'm not going to really show you how I did the scale form in a decal. Just know that you can put scale form in a decal and use it for all kinds of cool stuff. You can also use it as a light projection material. So scale form being able to project onto a texture, anything that you can use a normal texture for, you can use scale form in, and you can actually make it interactive if you wanted to. So alright, first off, let's see, how did I get it to scale based on my distance? That's not super simple, but it's not very complicated. I believe it is here. So what I've got is on level loaded, it just starts checking this. All it does is it checks your distance between the player and the object. Okay. In this case, it's called Shootable Trigger. I'll get into that in a second. And then I divide the amount by 10 because I want to be on a little bit of a smaller scale. And all I do is after that, I have a matinee sequence here. Now, if I pop this open, you'll see that I've got, let's see if I can't get this in better view, a value of 1 and a value of 4 at frame 200. Now what happens is if I look at the object when I scrub this, it just scales from 0 to 4 and over the course of 200 seconds. Now in this case what we're doing is this is not counted as seconds, this is actually counted as distance because what we're doing is we have exposed the variable force start position. So if I do a new matinee here, you can see that if I right click expose variable, force start position becomes a float variable, and that will pop this out. You can now pipe this to a variable. Force start position is basically the time on the timeline that you want it to start. So if we look at this, you see my play rate is 1. However, if I set it to 0 and I hit play, it still functions perfectly normal. Doesn't matter the play rate. I could set it to 10 or whatever. So what we do is we use our math here based on our distance. Okay, remember get distance pops out a float. We divide it by 10 and then we use that as the force start position. Now the key thing here, and really none of this matters, but what does matter is this here has to be checked, force start position. Just make sure that's checked. So right after we divide the float, okay, we hit play on the matinee. Exactly 1 millisecond later, because we also go into a delay, we stop the matinee. Okay, exactly 1 millisecond after that, we loop. Okay, so we're constantly checking. Now these are the main trick. This is the main trick for start position. That's the meat of the entire thing. That's how I achieved everything in this example. But the key to make sure that to get it to work is that you have to get them to happen in sequence. Certain things cannot happen at the exact same time. You cannot hit play and stop at the same time. It doesn't make any sense. So you have to hit play and then stop. So we just throw in a minor delay, very small delay. After that, we cannot restart the whole thing and try it again because it will go through this and try to hit play at almost the exact same time. It's too fast, it won't work. So we do another delay of 1 millisecond before we reloop the whole thing. Okay, so how does this basically work? I'm going to log my distance between the player. Okay, I'm just going to show it, and it's going to spit out. Now I got to turn down my volume because that's a loud thing. Okay, you can see I'm 147 away. And as I get closer, you can see this thing has collision, so I can only get about 10 units. That's about as close as I can get. But you can see there that it is spitting out my distance. Now if I log after the float, after here, it should actually end up being the same because the thing shows up, but you can see it's basically the same here. But without the divide, so if I just divide by 1, this is the raw distance that you get. Okay, and you'll notice that it doesn't work for, it doesn't really do anything. It is actually kind of doing something, but really what's happening is I'm too far away from it. So the raw distance is, I feel, on a scale that's too high. Now, the reason that this matches is because of the timeline, okay, being 200 frames. Now, if I didn't divide it, this would have to be out at 2000, okay, which is possible. You can go all the way out over here and find 2000, but who wants to do that? There's no point. We could have also made it by 20 instead of 200, and instead over here divided by 100, and it would basically work exactly the same. It doesn't really matter because of the blends between frames. Because remember, Kismet is a timeline, not a frame marker. Okay, these are seconds. So remember, there's an infinite amount of time between any point in time because you can constantly shrink your measurement. Okay, you can get more and more precise. So that's how we did this one. All right, this is the scale. So just based on your distance, plays this at the point of your distance marker. And I just made sure that my timeline scale matched my distance scale with a maximum of 200. So if I go outside of 200, it will not do anything because it will just constantly be playing at the end here. Okay, if it wanted to play at 210, it wouldn't be able to get there. Okay, so that's how that works. Very simple. Now the door. Well, let's move on to the shooting one. Okay, now the fact that I'm using a shootable trigger is slightly unfortunate, and I kind of debated whether or not I wanted to do it because unfortunately I cannot display the script for this. Now this is a custom actor, and you should be able to find how to get this script on UDK forums. You might even be able to find it if you look through my posts, because I believe I got the base script for that like 3 years ago or something. People helped me online. But if you look, this object here is a shootable trigger, and it just has an option to say what is the remote event, okay, and it can call which static mesh, and you can set the lighting. That's all that it really needs to give you, and there's a button here for reset sequence. So again, because it's like to my game and the script was not written by myself and has additions to it that aren't actually completely necessary to pull this particular thing off, I'm not going to show it, but you guys can look it up. Just look up how to get a shootable trigger, and basically it's the script is the theory behind it is basically on take damage, activate a remote event. That's it, and really that's all it is. So you could definitely do the same thing if you made it an interp actor with health or a K actor with health and just made sure it never became live and said on take damage or on modify health or anything like that. So I just kind of shortcutted that, and I apologize for not being able to show you the scripts, but yeah, it is too custom to really help anybody. So all we do is we have a object scale variable that starts off at pretty much 0, and it just adds 0.1 every time, and same exact thing for the Matinee. Okay, pretty much if I scrub this, it just gets bigger. Okay, and you can do it on any scale you want, and I did it to 10 seconds here. And so all I do is I add a variable, I hit play and stop just like I did before. Okay, play immediately, stop. I did even a smaller or a larger duration here. This Matinee actually allows it to play. Okay, none of that matters. And force start position on, and here's the object, and here's the variable with force start position exposed. Okay, so it starts at this number's position, so it's basically in 0.1 seconds, and then after that it just checks to see if we're greater than 10, and if it is, then we reset it. Okay, just reset. So it's going to go up to 10, and then the next time it's going to go back down to 1. Now if you wanted it to say go up to 10 and then come back down to 1, you could simply just switch a variable saying growing or shrinking, and determine whether or not you need to multiply the variable by -1 or not, and that's it. Okay, and so, or subtract instead of add, so you would just change this to negative 0.1. That's that, and that's all it is. Very, very simple. Now the door is a little bit more complicated, and the only reason is because I added a few extra functions here. Just wanted to say door active, and I put a trigger touch here. Now if you look, I do have a trigger, okay, with a radius of 512. Okay, so this isn't actually going to be doing anything until I get into the radius. So the first thing it's going to do is it's going to say, okay, door active, this variable here, I've got named variables that match it. When you touch it, we set to true, and when you untouch it, we set to false. When you touch it, it starts this event, which is the same exact thing, get the distance. However, I'm doing it to the trigger, from the player to the trigger, because if I did it to the door and the door is moving, that distance will be, as I get closer, that distance will change because the door is moving. You want to do it to a fixed point. You don't have to do it to a fixed point. You could do a lot of creative stuff with moving points, but in this case I wanted it to be so that when you were pretty much in between the two doors was its max value. Now this one's a little different. Divide the float by 10, same thing. Okay, I could log that, but I don't need to. And we do pretty much the exact same thing here. Okay, we immediately go to play, which is this line here. Immediately go to play, and 0.001 seconds later we stop. And again, we go to, after that we go to another delay, very minor, just to make sure that it happens in sequence, and we restart. But before we restart, we check if door is active. Okay, because if you leave this, it becomes inactive. That's the only thing that happens here, is it just sets this variable to false. So on the loop, we just check. If it's false, it goes nowhere. If it's true, it does loop. So once you leave the area, it's going to stop looking for you at the door. Okay. Now the kind of one of the things that was required was that on level loaded, that I start and stop the movie immediately. And the reason for that is because if I hit play here and I look at the doors from kind of a distance, let's try to fit all this. It's kind of hard to fit in. Let's do this. You can see that at the start of the animation the doors are open, and at the end of the animation the doors are closed, because as I get closer I want them open, and as I'm farther away I want them closed, right? So when my distance is 0, I want it open, not closed. Okay, and because it starts like this, and I don't want to reverse it, what I do is, so this is at 53 seconds. Okay, because if I log this here, now it's real simple to get your distance. All you got to do is just divide it by whatever number you really want. I mean, it could be 100 or 10 or not even divide it at all if you wanted to do that. But if I log this, you'll see, let's kill the other log, because that's going to be interfering with what I'm doing, which is here. Just shut that one off. Okay, so right when I enter this, you'll see it starts logging, and the max, pretty much the max distance that I can get to is like 53.06. If I go any farther back, by 53.2, 53.4, I'm out of it. So I set my max distance to be pretty much 53. Okay, remember, as soon as I enter that trigger is when this whole sequence is going to be true and start looping. So, and that's including this log. So as I get closer, 53. Okay, and the actual distance that I'm at is 530. That's the real distance, and it's pretty close to this. But you got to remember that, you know, this is based on when the front of you touches it, you know, so you have a certain radius. That's why it's not exactly 512. That's why it has that additional. It has the radius of my character's collision object. So you got to kind of factor that. But I just found that the easiest way is just to log the distance and just get at the max range. So I figured out that it was okay, 53 was the max, and that's why I set my max time here to be 53. Now that's not the right one. It's this one here. Okay, again, you can see that 53 seconds is the maximum time. So what I did was the door open amount, now it's the same exact thing as the scale variable here. It's the same thing. I'm just getting the distance of firing it to the float here. Okay, but I just changed the name so that they didn't interfere. Each event was completely separate. And I just defaulted it to 53 because I wanted to make sure that this plays at the end of the animation and stops to force the doors closed in the beginning. Okay, so it's going to hit play, it's going to be at start position 53, and it's going to hit stop immediately. And that's all I really needed to do. You want to make sure that looping is not on. And the reason is because with that, if I started exactly 53, and even that 0.1 second of delay here would have sent it back to 0. So we don't loop. So really that's it. I mean, there's nothing else to it. You just use your distance. Now, again, the main trick is expose for start position, and instead of considering Matinee as a timeline, use it as a data table. And any animation you can scrub through. This could be a brightness of a light. It could be a rotation of something. It could pretty much be anything that you wanted it to be. In this case, I just did some simple animations. And the cool thing is that it will continue on whatever scale you want. And the nice thing about the scaling thing is that you basically have very direct control over the distance, the max distance, and the max scale that it will get. So you can edit it. So if you wanted it to be from 1024 units away to 0, and you wanted it to grow to 100 times, you could do that easy. Just set the timeline to 1024, which is going to be a really long looking timeline, but it doesn't really matter because it's just in seconds. It's just a number. So that's how we did it. Now if I play this, you'll see that if I shoot this one, it's going to grow, but if I also shoot this one, it's going to grow, and if I shoot this one, it's going to grow. The only reason for that is because each one of these calls the same exact remote event. Okay, they all just call scale me, and scale me is the one remote event that controls the one object here. Okay, so you could again, you could do this in Kismet completely custom if you wanted to just say, on actor take damage or anything like that, and it would be the same exact fire. You could have it on a trigger for hitting U's or whatever you wanted to. But let me just show you really quick the reason that some of this is actually necessary, because you may think, well, why don't you just hit play on a Matinee and scale it up? The reason is because if I take one of these and I come here and I make a new Matinee and I make a new empty group, okay, and I do a float property track of draw scale, and I tell it, let's see, okay, let's set the value here to 1, and after 5 seconds we'll set the value to 2. So it's just going to scale up to 2. Okay, now I'm also going to add a new movement track. So let's close this. So it is where it is, and I'm also going to move it a couple units to the left, like 64 units to the left. So it's going to move and scale. Let's move it a little bit more to make that a little bit more dramatic. Oh wait, I gotta activate that there, and come on. Okay, so you see it moves to the left and scales. Okay, now I'm going to get this to go on level load here. So new event, level loaded, going to hit play. I'm going to set this guy to looping. Now you'll see what happens. Okay, it's going to go and it's just going to restart. Boom. Boom. Okay, so it's just going to restart over and over again. Now, if you would think, well, all you got to do is no reset on rewind. Now watch what happens. Watch the difference between the movement and the scale. Notice that no reset on rewind does not work with scale, which I kind of consider to be a little bit of a bug. So it's not like you can just start and stop a Matinee sequence with scale in there. Because movement doesn't reset, you can see that it constantly keeps moving from its current position, but scale keeps resetting. And that's the reason I kind of figured I had to do it this way. So, and I would have to make sure that I set, like if I wanted it to be really huge at this point, I would have to make sure that the scale got really huge, and I would have to animate its entire movement length and its entire scale amount. I couldn't do this, where you can constantly just have something keep moving and not resetting, because it does jump the scale back to 0. That does not mean, it doesn't, because you know what the no reset on rewind just says, okay, every time you hit play, just play it from here, wherever I'm at. Don't put me back to where my animation is. Just start me moving from here. Okay, but scale won't do that. It won't say, okay, well, just start scaling me up from here, because it's an actual property. Okay, it's not like a global track. So let's see the difference if instead we delete this, and at the end of the movement track we activate this, and we actually just use the scale tool. So it's a world scale. Okay, and you can see that it doesn't actually take it. Okay, scale that down. I'm just basically scaling my object completely aside from the animation. You can't animate like that. So you have to affect the draw scale property. So that's why we kind of have to do this bit of a trickery, which is slightly unfortunate in a sense, but it does make sense in a way. The difference between a movement track and a property edit, you couldn't tell the property is not exactly something that is like being added on to. It's a full-blown like set me at this point. So one of the things that would be nice if anybody was listening from Epic would be to be able to have this value, say a particular value, which is just like a movement track, and you can see that if I go here that it's my X movement. If there was a way to make this here actually be based on a variable would be nice. The time and the value itself would be very nice if we could expose those as variables, so that we could do pretty much billion more things dynamically with Matinee. So this is HipHon signing off. Hope you guys found that enjoyable. Again, the whole secret is just to expose for start play and use it as a data table. And other than that, just a quick tip, you can use scale form animations in decals, and you can use them in light functions, which I have another tutorial that's really long that proves that, and it's pretty awesome.